Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Everyone, hello, Maverick family. And new viewers all around the world. Tonight, we have the Iran war on again. The on again, off again, off again, on again. War is definitely on again. U.S. Central Command confirming the U.S. is in process right now bombing Iran again, in retaliation for strikes against vessels in the Hormuz Strait. NATO Summit today. We'll bring you some of the highlights from that and some of the controversial statements coming from Donald Trump again, which was something the NATO leaders are hoping to avoid if possible. But of course, that is unavoidable given the current political situation. What else do we have for you? Major arrests in an ongoing terrorism investigation involving multiple countries, including Canada. So we'll bring you that as well. And the controversy surrounding the Gordie Howe Bridge in Canada. I'll bring you maybe a little bit of a different perspective on that tonight as we progress through tonight's top stories of the day, and we'll start digging into it all on the other side of this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Let's start digging right into it, shall we? So, airstrikes on Iran taking place even as we speak. We have footage here of U.S. airstrikes hitting Iran's Bandar Abbas tonight. Here's what we have.
خیلی وحشتناک بود. بندر عباس یا ابوالفضل دوباره جنگ شروع. خیلی وحشت.
I've been corresponding with a few people through the day today as people were sending me messages to update me, I guess, on everything going on with this new round of violence in the Middle East. And I said, well, it's the greatest ceasefire ever. It's not a ceasefire. It's a ceasefire to end all ceasefires. The ceasefire, the likes of which we've never seen before. And I think that's probably true because never before in my lifetime have I seen a ceasefire with as much firing going on as we have in the Strait of Hormuz. And that is what's happening again tonight. And then earlier today I said, well, we'll have this, and I should preface this by explaining, when I received these messages this morning, it was about the attack on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. And then I said, yeah, because it's the greatest ceasefire ever. And I said, by tonight, we'll have film or video at 7, because I knew that the United States would retaliate right away, even though Trump said 2 days ago, I think it was, that he was going to give Iran a week off. And I think that's because of the public displays for the funeral of their supreme leader, Khamenei, and that has attracted hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people out into the streets of Iran, which just illustrates further why this was an ill-conceived war by Donald Trump. He, I think, has clearly underestimated the resolve of the Iranian people, and clearly there are many people in Iran that would like to see things change there politically and would like to see the government overthrown, which is what I think ultimately he was hoping for in the beginning of this conflict, having even gone on hijacked television airwaves with Benjamin Netanyahu in the earliest stages of this conflict to encourage Iranian citizens to rise up against their own government. And prior to the actual hostilities between Iran, the United States, and Israel, there were people who were hanged in public from cranes by Iran because they tried to do just that, but without any real support from the United States, even though it's fairly clear that there was encouragement from the U.S. side for that to happen. Things have not gone smoothly and certainly have not gone according to whatever plan Donald Trump may have had in there. At least I don't think so, because it has not gone well for the United States thus far. And things getting even more complicated, as tonight we're seeing there is another emergency unfolding. We have an airliner that apparently it looks like it's crashed. This is a K2 Airways flight, KTA 1732, has been reported missing. Now, there is radar data that has been shared by Flight Radar 24 indicating the aircraft may have crashed into the sea southwest of Karachi, although officials have not confirmed the aircraft's status. Let's bring up the graphic to show you the path. I guess this plane, it's not highlighted here for me. Let me get rid of this blue highlight. Okay, that's much better. Now you will be able to see the graphic on the screen. Looks like the destination may have been Pakistan. And rapid descent reported based on radar data. And now a big question mark. Where's the plane? It looks like it's crashed. What's going to happen now? Why did it crash? What happened? Was it with all of the hostilities going on, I have to wonder if it was hit by some sort of missile or anti-aircraft fire of some kind. I cannot say. That's entirely speculation on my part, but it just illustrates why this is something of a mystery at this point, and also a developing international story. The whole situation in the Middle East clearly flying out of control. And we have another image here kind of showing some of the damage tonight. And video.
وای وای
So all this happening against the backdrop of NATO leaders meeting in Turkey today. 32 NATO heads of state and government are meeting at the presidential complex in Turkey, hosted by Erdogan and Donald Trump attending and pressing allies, so-called allies. I'll add to that as a qualifier, so-called allies, because I don't know how allied the allies are these days, but he's pressing allies to take on more responsibility for their own security. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky also there, joining a leaders' dinner this evening. A major theme is defense investment. Allies working toward higher spending targets, with European members and Canada already increasing core defense outlays by more than $139 billion last year. Today, NATO Defense Industry Forum. At that forum, they are expected to announce major new procurement deals to boost production and innovation. I saw there was a new deal signed between Ukraine and Denmark for drones. Now, on Ukraine, European allies and Canada are set to pledge around 70 billion euros, or roughly 80 billion US dollars in military aid, equipment, and training for both 2026 and 2027. The US is not contributing new funds. Just reinforcing what I said earlier, so-called allies. Allies are also formally recognizing Ukraine as a contributor to collective security. It looks like Canada and some of the other countries also pledging support to beef up Ukraine's air defenses, and especially in light of the massive exchanges of drone and missile attacks between Russia and Ukraine back and forth, and Ukraine striking inside Russian territory deeper than ever before, but not having any way, it looks like right now, to counter incoming missile attacks, because Patriot missile supplies have been pretty much depleted from the looks of things. Prime Minister Mark Carney held meetings with President Erdogan and Zelensky today. Carney highlighting that Canada has now met NATO's traditional 2% defense spending target for the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall. He has a video out tonight highlighting that, sort of a promotional video. I would call it propaganda, I guess. If it's coming from the government, I think it's automatically sort of earmarked as such. Carney also taking part in discussions on defense industry and innovation. I do believe we have the comments between Carney and Zelensky at the NATO Summit queued for you right here. Let's go to that right now. And just yesterday, of course, Canada announcing that it will be purchasing new submarines from Germany, not South Korea. When I say that, I mean companies, not directly from the governments, but contracts with the shipbuilding companies, sub-building companies that were competing for that. And I'm seeing today, too, that Korea is pulling out of some sort of a joint venture in Hamilton that would have been involved with the steel industry and Mohawk College, and that is a direct response to the announcement from Canada yesterday that the German contractor is the winner of the contract with Canada for the new submarines, not the South Korean firm. Here's the clip now with Carney and Zelensky in Turkey at the NATO Summit.
President Zelensky is the host. You're the host. You're the host.
Yeah.
What are we having?
So happy to see you. Dear Prime Minister, thank you so much. Dear journalists, our teams, and we are very thankful for your support. Yes, today we joined the Brink important initiative. I don't want to speak about it. I think you will be a little bit first. Yes, but thank you very much for this idea. Yeah. And the second point, thanks for the program. And really, now maybe the biggest deficit is air defense, and we've got the big package from Canada. We are thankful for this, and some parts are on the way also.
Yes.
Of this, and thank you so much. Also, today we are in our team. We have also not only air defense questions, not only weapon, and also the question of energy, which is closer to it a priority. And here we got the director of NAC Naftagaz, and we will speak about 3 projects, what we want to do together with Canada. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. President. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ce qui est important, c'est notre coopération à court terme, à moyen terme et à long terme. À court terme, la défense sur les attaques, les menaces de la Russie insupportables, et le Canada est là. Au moyen terme, l'énergie, et puis à long terme, la reconstruction, une économie forte, l'économie ukrainienne très forte pour le futur, pour l'avenir, pour tout le peuple ukrainien. Canada is here, short, medium, and long term. Mr. President, we're going to talk about some very specific initiatives around air defense and continued support through Pearl and other initiatives, building on very constructive conversations we had at the G7 as G7 partners and broadening out through NATO. That's the first thing. Secondly, Canada will be announcing about $900 million of support for medium-term military support. When I say medium-term, in the coming months, both in terms of vehicles, both in terms of munitions and other support, in addition to this vital support for air defense, and then very much in terms of the needs on energy for the winter, but then beyond for the reconstruction and a strong Ukrainian economy that's fully integrated in Europe, fully integrated in the global economy. Let me say one last thing, which is that this barbarism of Putin, which continues in recent days, will not succeed. Every day, this is senseless suffering, certainly of the innocent civilians in Ukraine, Ukrainian children stolen, Ukrainian children, but also with soldiers on both sides, soldiers in the Russian army. They will not win. The resolve of the Ukrainian people, first and foremost, but also of your allies, of your friends, is absolute. Let's end this. The pressure on Russia is only going to increase. Ukraine is going to win. We have much positive work to do. Everyone around this table, everyone watching, wants the positive work of peace, prosperity, security for all going forward. And that's our objective, and that's what we will achieve. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, President.
Thank you, media.
Okay, now also tonight, oil prices, not surprisingly, beginning to climb again because of the renewed hostilities, the attacks in the Middle East between Iran, the exchange of fire during this ceasefire that isn't a ceasefire. Oil prices rising. Here's Forbes tonight. Oil prices up as U.S. cancels Iran sales license and launches strikes. So we're seeing already prices have increased about 4% just since this newest round of attacks began, which is entirely fresh within the last few hours. Oil prices rose Tuesday, it says here, following the U.S. government's decision to cancel Iran's license to sell crude and targeted with military strikes as tensions escalated between Washington and Tehran. The move follows suspected Iranian attacks on ships that use the U.S. Navy's protected route through the Strait of Hormuz, jeopardizing the interim peace deal signed by Washington and Tehran. The thing about that peace deal is there seems to be some indication that Iran is kind of looking at this whole situation now and rejecting it, saying that this MOU is basically dead. No more. We have more video here of the results of these strikes by the U.S. on Iranian targets. Not clear what we're looking at in terms of, possible deaths. I see today that CNN has some sort of an exclusive report out saying that there were faulty intelligence is what led to the attacks that the attack that resulted in the destruction of that girls' school in Iran months ago and the deaths of those young people, which Donald Trump said on Air Force One when asked about it in a military scrum back at that time. He said, no, we didn't do it. That was Iran, which was a straight up blatant lie because the U.S. military itself came out and said that it was a U.S. missile that did it, which is the responsible thing to do. But Trump didn't take that road. Now, tonight, we'll see where that CNN report goes. I can also tell you that U.S. Central Command confirming all of these attacks tonight in Iran. We've got the post for you, most up-to-date information coming from CENTCOM. Here's what they're saying. U.S. Central Command forces have begun launching a series of powerful strikes against Iran to impose heavy costs for targeting and attacking commercial shipping crewed by innocent civilians in an international waterway. The U.S. strikes are in response to Iranian attacks on 3 commercial vessels that were transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's demonstrated aggression was unwarranted, dangerous, and a clear violation of the ceasefire, which is not a ceasefire, because we don't like playing mind games like that with people. Around here, we try to give you the information straight up, and this was no ceasefire. Maybe a reduction in hostilities, but not a ceasefire. Cannot be such a thing when people are still shooting at each other, and yet that is part of the entire Donald Trump psyop with Iran. Call it a ceasefire, that even when it isn't a ceasefire, and the media will keep using that word, ceasefire. It's a ceasefire. It's a ceasefire. It's a ceasefire. If you say it often enough, people actually begin to believe it, even though it isn't so. And you can clearly see that it isn't a ceasefire because they're shooting at each other, trying to blow each other up. That's not a ceasefire. But if you say it, you can just stand there in front of the burning building and say, no, nothing to see here, folks. And a lot of people will still believe it. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Amazing. This, I guess, is being described tonight as, I guess, potentially the largest attack by the United States against Iran since the ceasefire began. It's the large. You see, this is what I'm saying. This is why it's a screwy thing where they're playing with people's perceptions and they're messing with your mind. It's the largest attack since the ceasefire because there have been other ones along the way over like the past month. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely freaking ridiculous. Here, more video. Well, let's show you. Put a ceasefire. Indeed, we got film at 7. Now 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. As I predicted earlier today, only this is bigger, as you can clearly see. This is, well, we're seeing reports out of Washington that suggest what the United States is doing here is intended directly from Trump. I guess this is supposed to be more of a punishment rather than a proportional response to what they're saying Iran has done in the Strait of Hormuz by attacking those vessels. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarmingly, some media outlets publishing things they simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
In an ocean of lies a century deep, the truth awaits. Choose not the red pill. Choose not the blue pill. For both are an illusion. Discover the power of M. The power of individuality. We are Mavericks. We are the way to the light. Fear not the storm. Join our quest for truth. Truth will set you free. Maverick News. The world is watching.
This is this situation with Iran is also sparking, a flurry of social media posts, and of course, Mario Nawfal hosting a big X Spaces right now. I think what we'll do is we'll just dip into that for just a moment. Hang on here a second. I'll bring this up.
All you have to do is look up LNG exports for the United States and look at what happened ever since he became in office the first time.
Thanks,
it's absolutely insane. It doesn't happen inorganically. It doesn't.
Can I say one thing?
Appreciate the perspective of the markets. Myron, I really need to get to some hands. If it's like 30 seconds only.
It's 30 seconds, not even 30 seconds. It's gonna be faster because people were when I talk about the MOU, it was literally point 1. I'll read it verbatim. The United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies in the current war, by signing this MOU, declare the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon, and undertake from now on not to initiate any war or any military operation. So for all the idiots in here that are saying like, "Oh, you're wrong," it's literally point 1 in the MOU.
I don't think anybody was saying anything else other than that. I think the conversation though was, but
he's getting it.
It's okay. It's okay.
The MOU really is basically dead.
The context of today, though, and the strikes that we're seeing, I think it's fair to say, is also related to Article 5, which I'm hoping we can also dive into a little bit more. I know, Gerald, I wanted to go to you and then Dr. Fungi and some of the other hands, but Gerald, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just thanks, Hazi. It's just that what Myron's talking about and what Joe's talking about. Maybe it's because I'm a reporter and an attorney looking at this, but I mean the MOU is not even actually binding on the United States and Iran. I don't know if they're aware of that. I mean, there are long legal discussions about it. It's a non-binding political framework. It's not a ratified treaty. It doesn't bind even the United States and Iran, certainly not the United States, to do what it sets out to do. And Israel not only was not a party to the MOU, he can look through every page of it, it didn't sign anything. It wasn't part of the negotiating process, but it formally rejected being restricted by its framework On the day that it was made public, Israeli leadership explicitly stated that military actions would continue regardless of the diplomatic understanding. Iran did not then walk away from the table. Iran didn't say, oh, by the way, Israel has formally rejected it. They did not sign the MOU. They were not presented the MOU. And therefore, since they are not going to abide by it and they're going to have military actions in Lebanon, we will not abide by it by day one. Iran went along with it. But what they knew their leverage point was, and they continue to know that, and they continue to press us, and there's no easy answer on that, is the Strait of Hormuz. Anybody who believes that the Iranians are only firing on Qatari and Saudi ships and others because Israel's in Lebanon is in a fantasy land. Iran is firing on those ships because it is determined to exercise some level of control that maybe together with the side deal with Oman allows it to collect whatever you want to call it, a fee, a toll, something for passing through the strait, and use that as leverage at a final point. That Israel happens to be in Lebanon is a fantastic point for the Iranians to be able to say, that's why we're doing it. Blame Israel. They're responsible for it. Drive a further fissure between Israel and the United States from the MAGA right so that they're furious with Israel. The people like Tucker Carlson and
Can I
others
ask you
who say,
something,
by the
Gerald?
way, we just follow Israel into every war. So create that as an additional fissure point absolutely makes sense. But in practical sense, if you're looking at the MOU, it's absolutely bizarre for me to think that somebody's citing the MOU to be able to say, oh, it was peace on all fronts. That was clearly not the case from the very moment it was signed.
Thanks, Gerald. I want to go
Can I
to
ask
Dr.
Gerald
Fungi.
a
Joe,
question?
we
Hansi,
have
it's
a
really
lot.
fast.
We have a lot of hands, though, Joe.
Okay,
Can you
okay.
just hold on to it, and we'll come back? I promise. If Gerald, can you? How much longer can you
I
stay with us?
I had a hard break at 7:30, but I pushed that off. Don't worry, it's a good discussion as always.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gerald. I want to go to you, Dr. Fungi. You've been here listening for a while. I want to get your reactions to what we're seeing and your thoughts as well on the MOU. I know you've been following this closely in terms of, and what Gerald was saying in terms of it just being an agreement, not necessarily a legally binding contractual type of treaty, if you will. So go ahead, Dr. Fungi.
Hi, Azzy, Vladimir, and everyone, and hi, Gerald. Always great to come to spaces and listen to Gerald when he has to explain and outline things in a very articulate way. I want to debunk something regarding Iran's current behavior in Hormuz, because it is built on a long-standing strategy. It's not a sudden byproduct of the present war or anything Israel has done in the last month. um, Hormuz was hijacked by Iran well before this war and well before the latest round of Israel Iran confrontation. Um, Tehran has consistently tried to convert geography into political capital. Every tanker, every shipping route is a potential bargaining chip. So, for decades, Tehran has treated the Strait of Hormuz as a leverage point against the broader international system, and more specifically, against US pressure. So, the idea that closing Hormuz or threatening shipping could be used to deter attacks, to retaliate against sanctions, or even to raise the price of confrontation is part of Iranian doctrine going back to the 1980s. So over time, we know that this has evolved from, episodic threats into what we see now a systematic practice. They're deploying fast attack boats, the missiles and mines. They're testing rules of engagement, and they are periodically harassing or seizing commercial vessels to make clear that the strait is not a neutral transit corridor, but a space that can be politicized at will. So the present MOU and the war have given the IRGC new legal and rhetorical cover, but they really sit on top of a reality in which Iran already treated the Strait as an area under de facto Iranian veto. So what the MOU does is formalize part of that claim by speaking of Iran's responsibility for quote unquote arrangements and quote unquote best efforts on safety. That is a language Iran can then stretch to justify a more intrusive management regime. And there's also a legal dimension to the Iranian posture, Iran has never, ever ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the UNCLOS. It signed it, but it never ratified it. And in practice, it privileges its own domestic legislation that dates back to 1982, and also its security doctrine over the more expansive notions of freedom of navigation that is embedded in that convention. So for Tehran, Hormuz is not simply an international strait governed by a multilateral treaty it did not ratify. It is a coastal zone where Iranian law and Iranian threat perceptions are assumed to prevail. So that makes it easier for the IRGC and other state organs to claim that their management of routes, their requirements for prior coordination, and even what we see now, the punitive actions against what they call offending ships, are rooted in sovereign legal authority rather than in a breach of an international obligation, because they say they never ratified it. So from the outside, this looks like a hijacking of a global commons, but from within Iran's own legal and political frame, it is presented as enforcement of national rules in a strategic waterway that happens to be vital to the rest of the world.
Was the Strait open on February 27th or not? Was the Strait open on February 27th or not, Doctor? No, I want to answer this. Was the Strait open on February 27th or not, Doc?
What I was answering is what you said is wrong.
Was it open
Saying
or not?
that it had to do with Israel is wrong.
Was it open or not?
I want to refer you to the Iran-Iraq war in 1980, when Iran systematically attacked Gulf shipping, including in and around Hormuz, as part of the so-called tanker war.
Was it open on February 27th or not?
I'm going to finish my sentence. They were
Come on,
using
Jill.
mines.
Was it open or not?
Let her make her point.
Okay, no.
Let her make her point.
I asked her a specific question and she
I'm
can't
going
answer
to
it
make
because she
my
knows she's wrong.
point, because I don't want to go into this. I am just debunking what you just said.
If you could just, it's okay.
Let me just finish, Azzy. Just three examples. 1980, the tanker war. 2019, 2020, the tanker seizures, right? And 2021, there were other seizures, especially a South Korean tanker, amid a dispute over frozen Iranian funds. So this doesn't have anything to do with Israel. Thank you.
2006
Thanks,
naval blockade of Lebanon by Israel. 2007 until now, the blockade of Gaza Strip. When Israel does it, it's not a problem, but when Iran does it, it is. It's just a double standard here, Ozzy.
I appreciate that perspective, Joa, and I definitely think that we can open this conversation up and have that another time. But I do want to get to some of the news that came out. I don't know, Vladimir, if you saw this, and then we're going to get to some of the hands. I want to get Trent's opinion on this, and I also see AJ's with us and didn't get a chance to speak, and Jale and others. So it looks like President Trump did approve the strike plan against Iran and gave the final order on Tuesday while attending the NATO Summit in Turkey. This is according to Axios. Trump held a meeting with Hegseth, Rubio, Bessent, and also General Kane was there and other senior officials before authorizing the operations. This is the part, Trent, I want to ask you a quick question on this, because it says U.S. officials said that it remains unclear how long the strikes will continue, saying we'll get the assessment about the results of the strikes and make our decisions afterwards. Now, President Pezeshkian of Iran has now landed inside of Iran, I think, for about 30 minutes or so. He's been there. So we're waiting also to see how Iran may respond to some of this from a military perspective. What does that really mean for our listeners and others following this? When we hear a statement like that, we're going to get an assessment about the results of the strikes and make a decision after. What kind of results are they looking for when this is more of a punitive, as we spoke about earlier? There's no proportionality in this. This is punishment. So what kind of results would the U.S. be looking for to make a decision on this?
I suspect that's a bunch of code words for the American government signals intelligence and computer hacking abilities to figure out what the hell is going on with and inside the Iranian government. Additionally, you earlier pointed out, not this news release, but a little earlier, that the American strikes hit, or the Iranians reported that they hit fishing piers. And that implies to me that perhaps the Iranians were loading up vessels with sea mines and trying to send them out in the Gulf. That right there alone would draw an immediate response once it was determined that was going on. So we don't know what we don't know. That is, what are the checklist of things that the American national security people under President Trump want done in order to turn off the strikes? And the answer is, we don't know. We'll find out. Ask me again later. The other thing that I think needs to be pointed out is there has been an ongoing shadow fleet of small coastal tankers that have been getting oil out for Kuwait and for the United Arab Emirates and Oman, and going out to the mouth of the Gulf and filling up large tankers. This has been ongoing for quite some time. So to say that Iran has turned off the oil out of the Straits is not true. A lot of what is going on here may be shipping insurance. I mean, let's be honest. The reason that these companies stopped moving oil through the Straits was they couldn't get insurance for their tankers. Well, if you're using old, worn-out Greek shadow tankers to move things, that ships that have single hulls and should have been out of service a decade ago to move stuff, those are expendable assets when you get down to brass tacks. So, when I look at this, I'm seeing there is politics, there's economics, and there's intelligence going on. There's all sorts of stuff going on beneath the surface that we won't know until the shooting either resumes or stops. Over to you.
Thanks, Trent. Vladimir, I think, AJ, we haven't heard from AJ yet. Welcome, AJ, to the panel. What are your thoughts on what you're hearing, what you're seeing unfold? Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. I just want to share my insights. A couple of things on the war with Hezbollah. I think what's happening there is Israel's trying to decouple the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel itself by trying to isolate Hezbollah as a separate issue, separate than the MOU. Although the MOU says including Lebanon, but that's where the narrative seems to be going, and that's where the agenda seems to be going. And then the other thing too, in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, I think what we're going to see over the next few probably.
Did we just lose AJ?
So obviously
Okay, there you go.
Sorry. Yeah, the MOU is obviously non-binding. It's as good as the paper that it's written on, which is nothing in the global contracts and things like that. So I think what we're and the other thing that
okay, we'll come back to this. Maybe I'll keep monitoring this, but also what we have going on right now is the Department of the Treasury out of the United States issuing this, a revocation and wind down of the June 21st, 2026 authorization for the production, delivery, and sale of crude oil, petrochemical products, and petroleum products of Iranian origin. So, as I reported just a short time ago, the United States basically revoking the license for Iran to sell internationally oil. And that is, of course, going to reduce supply, or at least curtail supply. And that's why we're seeing already a response in terms of higher oil prices, 4% up already tonight. Live map showing what's going on in Iran, Strait of Hormuz tonight. And we're seeing the Qatari Foreign Ministry demanding that Iran immediately cease any practices that threaten the security of the region, that may endanger maritime and energy security. The Saudi Foreign Ministry tonight condemning In the strongest terms, Iran's targeting of 2 Saudi and Qatari oil tankers as they crossed the Strait of Hormuz. And earlier this evening, Israel media reporting that Israel fears that U.S. approval of Turkey establishing an air defense system in Syria will limit the Israeli Air Force's freedom of action in attacking Iran. And we've just heard some discussion on the role Israel is playing in all of this in the X spaces that we were highlighting for you just moments ago. In fact, let's just go back to that briefly.
Assessment. I've been saying this since April and May. You guys can look at my timeline. Every MOU, every ceasefire, everything that we see from the Americans is essentially a battle for narrative control, and it isn't anything that will be lasting. What what we will see over coming months is more and more and more escalation until Iran will be perceived as having made such a critical blunder or such a critical mistake that the United States will have no choice to ultimately declare some kind of a war, some kind of emergency position against the Iranian government.
Thanks. AJ, you're starting to cut in and out really bad. I don't know if you can hear me. If you want to try to recycle and come back, we can hear the rest of it. I want to go. Yeah, I know, Gerald, your time is limited with us, so I want to go to you real quick, and then I want to get some thoughts from Dr. Hotho from Saudi Arabia's perspective. So, Gerald, thank you for staying with us a little bit longer than you intended.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Hazi. Thanks. I'm sorry I'm not able to stay longer. I just wanted to say that one thing to watch for is, and I think that it was Vladimir had said this earlier, is whether Hegseth goes to Israel tomorrow. Now, it's the middle of the night already over there, and the Pentagon had refused to confirm it, but it was reported by CNN and Reuters and others that he was expected to leave Turkey, where he was and met. He was at the NATO Summit, was going to go to Israel for her first visit as the head of the Department of War and meet with Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz. Now, officially, the purpose was going to be to make the Israelis feel better about the potential sale of the F-35s, I get it, to Turkey. But you could not have a more important meeting in terms of timing because, as I'm sure everybody on the panel knows, and your listeners as well, Hegseth went from a person that a lot of Israelis didn't know almost anything about before February 28th to becoming sort of this folk hero in Israel. And it's been reported widely in Israeli press and that afterwards. So they view him, and he's been very warm in talking about Israeli military cooperation when they were having the original rounds of military action. So the only thing that could prevent that from happening, the reason I mention that, is if Iran does strike back. You talked about the targets before that they may look at. If Iran strikes back, it becomes a more complicated action. The U.S. is still figuring out the next round of what it will do into tomorrow, then clearly Hegseth is not going to be doing a walking tour inside of Israel. So if we see Hegseth cancel that visit to Israel tomorrow, to me, that would mean that they weren't able to just do the strikes that they intended and then let that play out. There's a little bit of a complication, and that doesn't mean that it's terrible, but that Hegseth has to focus on a different way. And if you see him in Israel, that's going to be an opportunity to keep a very close watch on what he does with the Israelis. I mean, the timing-wise is very, very important. That visit was set, although not officially confirmed, at least 24 hours before all of this happened, with the revocation of the oil, sales, and then the military strike on Iran tonight.
Okay, and OSIN Technical posting this tonight saying that U.S. airstrikes are continuing to target Iranian positions along the Strait of Hormuz, and they've created this graphic showing a number of USAF tankers are currently airborne supporting these airstrikes, as you can see here. So the airstrikes continuing, and we're hearing that Donald Trump gave final approval for these strikes as he spent the day at the NATO Summit. Still concerns and a bit of a mystery, a huge mystery really, surrounding the disappearance of this Boeing 737-400 freighter, which has gone missing in the Indian Ocean. It's happening just past the Gulf of Oman after taking off from the UAE. So we showed you earlier that there was flight tracking data that indicates there was a very fast, rapid descent, dropping about 35,000 feet in less than 2 minutes before disappearing off radar and then disappearing completely. Looks like it probably has crashed, and we still don't know what might have brought the plane down. It was en route from Karachi, Pakistan, or to Karachi, Pakistan, rather, from the UAE. We've got a bit of a video. Yeah, we do. Okay, let's show you here. Right there, as you can see. So this is a graphic, an animation of the flight path, and then it shows where it went down, reportedly. Okay, going back to the X spaces.
And it seems, whenever anybody brings up that Iran is trying not to get into this war, I mean, there was no need for those for those ships to be attacked. There was nothing that made Iran put Iran in a position where they had the right to attack those ships. I think that was pure aggression from Iran. And in a time when everybody's wishing for peace, I cannot say that Iran is also one of the parties that is looking for peace. If they're going to attack civilian, tankers and commercial ships, I don't think that's somebody looking for peace. And the problem is the talking points when you say this, they would say, yeah, but Israel. I don't think that's a fair assessment. I think that Iran should, if they're actually looking for peace, then I think that they should act like a peaceful nation. And this is really worrying. I don't know how the end game looks like. And and I really wish the end game doesn't look like Iran getting absolutely demolished after this. Because again, if Iran will continue to behave in this manner, I don't see a pathway where peace will happen. If they're going to continue terrorizing that Strait of Hormuz, continue attacking civilian ships and oil tankers that affect the whole world economy, I don't think anybody would want that. So I'm actually very surprised, and let's see what happens.
Thanks, Hoda. I saw a lot of reactions, and I see some new speakers as well. I see some of you have been waiting with your hands up. I want to go to Shahab real quick. He's a new speaker, and get his thoughts on this. And I'm going to go to Elisheva and Trent and Myron and others. Go ahead.
Hi, Ozzy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so right off the bat, what I wanted to say is, look, before I start anything, I just want to point out this mistake that I think people are making on both sides. That there's aggression happening from the Israeli side and the Iranian side. Okay, now just because I don't like Iran, then I should justify every action of Israel is not on. And similarly, if I hate Israel, that doesn't mean that I justify every action that Iran is doing. Okay, so that binary should not exist. Look, the kinetics between Iran and Israel started around 2024. Once when the Israelis attacked the Iranian embassy in Damascus. It's been going on since, but there's bad blood between Iran and the GCC states and the Arab states, not just the GCC. Don't forget, Iran ingressed into Syria for a very long time, and Iraq. So there's a general mistrust in this entire region. Okay, so try to understand the complexities of this geopolitical game that's going on. Second thing that I want to say is that, look, while we have these 60 days of negotiations going on, and someone very rightly pointed out that an MOU is not a binding agreement, and just and having said that, understand that there are other agreements that are also going side by side. Okay, so for example, we know that the MOU discusses that war will be stopped on all fronts, which includes Lebanon. Okay, however, the Lebanese government has a separate agreement that's going on with the Israeli government. Now, which binds the Israeli government to what contract? So, like someone pointed out, the Israelis never signed on to this MOU, but they have signed on to the agreement with the Lebanese government. Okay, so there are two parallel things going on, and this is not just the only case. There are many other cases. For example, in the Strait of Hormuz, the MOU is saying something, but there are existing laws on how international shipping goes through these waters. So what do you really follow? So there's a lot of gray area that people are exploiting. And having said that, when I think Myron was talking about how these ships are kind of, and he's right in a way that the Strait of Hormuz basically is a cul-de-sac, right? So the inward and outward movement of ships is through that same channel. Okay. So what used to happen in the past was that most of the ships used to go in through the Iranian channel, the water that's more to the Iranian side, and any shipment coming outside of the Persian Gulf would traverse the waters through Oman. Now, if the argument right now is that Iran is pissed off because these ships are now hugging Omani coastal waters and moving in and out, then I think Myron and many others need to understand that the Omani government has to allow that, right? So these ships can just not traverse their waters. They would need the Omani Navy to give them approval to traverse their waters. So what do we hear in the general perception or in the laity talk online? We hear that the Iranians are saying that they're trying to work a model with the Omani government where they want to start tolling the Strait of Hormuz, okay? But if that is the case, then why is Oman allowing these ships, like the Qatari vessel that got attacked today and the Saudi vessel, to move via these Omani waters? So something is not adding up. So, I can try to make it add up. It's just that I don't want to take more time. I want to give others a chance.
No, I definitely appreciate that. Vladimir, I think you have some news that you wanted to share, and then we can get to some of those hands.
Yeah, so basically we have an Iranian lawmaker is calling on the Iranian army to basically respond as fast as possible. And also we saw the report of Axios that Trump approved the plan to launch a strike on Iran from Turkey, which probably Turkey will not be very happy with that fact. And also we saw a US official talking to New York Times that strikes on Iran will continue for some time and will focus on a series of military targets. But then Axios also was saying that the US official will first assess the strike impact and then will decide what to do after that. And for the rest, there's also, there's other news of the Iranian president that left recently Iraq. And there's a lot of news in the Iranian media about the ongoing funeral procession for the late Iranian supreme leader in Iraq itself. Oil prices.
Okay, let's take a little break. We have other news to dig into, and then we'll continue to monitor the situation with Iran and keep you up to date as the broadcast continues. After this.
We are the Mavericks. Welcome to the Matrix, baby. Hope you like the view. We are the Mavericks. The world is watching. We are the Mavericks.
Yeah, and the funeral procession for Hamane. Huge crowds. Video. We have video here. Massive. Which, again, what Trump has done here is he has poked a hornet's nest. And it was not anticipating the response that he ended up with. Take the audio down off that. And that's what it looks like. And as I've watched the videos coming out of Iran over the past couple of days, crowds are predictably chanting "Death to America." So I don't think that Trump has won any hearts or minds with his bombs. I don't think it's working out the way that he planned at all. Man, what a mess. I remember 1979, the Iranian hostage crisis. I remember a lot. This isn't solving anything.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay. Back to the NATO summit, where, of course, Trump asked about Greenland, and his comments inflammatory. Poking hornets over here too, I guess, even now.
With respect to what? Well, that's what hurt my relationship with NATO, because Greenland doesn't help Denmark. Denmark doesn't spend money to really help Greenland, but it's an important part for the United States. And it's surrounded by China ships and Russian ships. And that's not going to happen. The ships it's not going to happen. It was Greenland that, and it continues to be, that should be controlled by the United States, not by Denmark. And when they wouldn't go along with it, and with all the money we spend to help them with Russia, and we don't have to spend any money, we could remove all of our soldiers out of Europe. Because as you probably noticed, Europe's a very different place than it was 20 years ago. A lot different, much different. It's a much different, and they better be careful with immigration and energy. If they're not careful with those two things, you're not going to have a Europe anymore. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
So he says, back to Canada here for a moment. We have this international crackdown, this major breaking story today with the U.S. Justice Department saying 24 suspects around the world, including 3 in Canada, have been arrested for their alleged ties to India-based organized crime groups. The charges include the 2023 murder of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Najjar in British Columbia. Indian gangster Lawrence Bishnoi, who is currently in prison in India, and his alleged lieutenant Satyendjit Singh, better known as Goldie Brar, and they are accused of ordering Najjar's assassination outside of Gurdwara in Surrey in June of 2023 in British Columbia. That made huge headlines here in Canada at the time, and occasionally coming back as a major news story since then, resurfacing, and such is the case today. A sweeping U.S. indictment against 37 suspects in total alleges the groups used high-profile killings and violence to terrorize and extort members of the Indian community. In one example, Bishnoi reportedly claimed responsibility for a shooting at the Vancouver home of a prominent Indian actor and singer in November 2023, posting a warning in Punjabi on Facebook that said, "No one can save you from us." So this was called Operation Hardball, and as part of that, authorities seized about 1,000 kilograms of cocaine and a dozen firearms. The Bishnoi gang is accused of funding its operations through drug trafficking. In November of 24, Bishnoi and Brar allegedly oversaw the shipment of 49 kilograms of cocaine headed to Canada that was intercepted in California. So 11 people, including Ravinder Singh Danda of Vancouver, Jaskarn Bagar of Surrey, and Gurtej Singh Smah of Creston, BC, faced charges in a separate alleged scheme to smuggle hundreds of kilograms of cocaine and methamphetamine from the U.S. into Canada each week. 17 members of a third crime group led by another imprisoned Indian gangster, Jagu Bhagwanpuria, were also charged. A news conference was held in Los Angeles, and at that news conference, RCMP Commissioner Mike Dehem said the investigation has dismantled the leadership of 3 brutal criminal organizations. We have the video, the clip of the RCMP commissioner here.
Good morning, everyone. Today, we are proud to say that after a 2-year investigation, we have dismantled the leadership of 3 criminal organizations that inflicted pain and cruelty on people, victims around the globe. Lawrence Bishnoi, Ravinder Danda, Jagu Bhagapura, some of the most cruel and wide-reaching criminals whose crimes range from kidnapping to extortion, to murder, to shootings, to arson, to drug trafficking, and many others. These groups are known to prey on the less fortunate to carry out the criminal activities. At the same time, we're putting a stop to a significant flow of drugs and firearms into Canada. We accomplished this thanks to the efforts of thousands of officers here in the United States and in Canada who today executed search warrants and arrests, immediately halting the ability of these criminals to continue to terrorize people in both countries and beyond. Specifically, of those indicted, 3 Canadians have been arrested today. They've been arrested in British Columbia, while a 4th one is still sought in Europe. All these individuals played a significant leadership role in directing criminal activities impacting multiple countries. Our work today makes our communities, cities, provinces, states, and countries much safer. But it also is a symbol of something even greater, strong and reliable collaboration that made this operation possible. Information sharing and intelligence sharing that translate into action that led to the takedown of these groups. The world has gotten smaller. These groups operate transnationally, and so must law enforcement. The RCMP was embedded with the FBI in an investigation that included operations and evidence gathering in the US, Canada, Mexico, France, Spain. International collaboration allows us to find criminals where they operate and enables us to target leadership structures or criminal groups responsible for destabilizing public safety in countries around the globe. The RCMP contributed knowledge and investigative power that helped lead to today's arrests and charges. The RCMP works in close coordination with law enforcement community in Canada to foster integrated investigative partnership, and we won't stop here. Thanks to the foundation of collaboration that we have here, we built through this operation, we will continue to hold international criminals to account. We will map networks, gather evidence, capitalize on each other's strengths and capabilities, and continue to dismantle organized crime groups. We will continue to take these steps together to enhance public safety here in Canada and around the world. Last, and it goes without saying, The results being announced today would not be possible without the dedication and professionalism of the women and men of the agency standing here today. A lot of sacrifice goes into a file that lasts 2 years, and I want to thank everyone who worked on this file. Thank you very much.
Okay. Short break, coming back. We've got blah, blah, blah on the other side of this blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah.
Maverick News. No blah, blah, blah.
So blah, blah, blah. I'm compelled to address this tonight. U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra. Definitely a lot of blah, blah, blah regarding the Gordie Howe Bridge. It all started with an appearance by the U.S. Ambassador to Canada on a live stream hosted by someone who goes by the food professor. Anyway, asked about this whole thing where Hoekstra is saying that Canada, the statement that Canada paid for the Gordie Howe Bridge, I think it's over $6 billion, is a myth. This is blah, blah, blah. This is, if you're a regular viewer of this program, you know we've started developing our own dictionary and maybe thesaurus. We're coming up with our own words for things because we're in unprecedented times. So one of the words recently that we came up with here is comblastulate. I'm telling you that Pete Hoekstra is a master comblastulator. Here's what he said. What is comblastulation? This is an exercise in combustulation, which results in absolute confusion.
By the Canadian government. So no, Canada put the money up front, but at the end of the day, the expectation is that there will be a use tax that will pay for the bridge.
So that clip created a lot of controversy, as we mentioned off the top.
So here's a response today. That was him on The Food Professor, and then that's a preface or an intro to this video with Brian Lilly and his guest, who then discuss what the U.S. ambassador to Canada is saying. And what's really going on here is you've got a master combustulator who has snorthed us. What's snorth? That is where you don't know whether you're coming or going. It's manipulation of language to confuse from someone who appears to be trying to help to explain something, when in reality, they're doing nothing but the opposite, which is to confuse the living daylights out of you so that you don't know what's up, what's down, what's north, what's south, east, west. You don't know whether you're coming or going. The intent here is to simply confuse. But more than that, the intent is to get other people to buy into what you are saying or what Pete Hoekstra is saying, to legitimize what is being said as though it's a valid statement, which it is not. It is absolutely a total attempt, and I'd say he's done a masterful job here of confusing people and getting people to buy into this manufactured reality. The truth is, Canada absolutely paid for the bridge in its entirety. It was constructed using U.S. and Canadian steel, U.S. and Canadian lumber. We know all of this to be true. We also know that the Canadian government paid for the whole thing up front. Therefore, they own it, except that Canada is also giving 50% ownership of the bridge to the state of Michigan. No investment needed. Canada paid for the entire thing. But as you just heard, the master combustulator, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, says, oh no, Canada paying for it? That's just a myth. Because why? He's saying it's because it's the motorists, it's the truckers, the trucking companies that cross the bridge, that will be crossing the bridge, that through the tolls that they pay, or he's calling it a use tax, those are the ones who are actually paying for the bridge, not the government. That is absolutely, to use a more common, maybe more recognizable term, that's gaslighting. I call it combustulation from the master combustulator. And he's done such a masterful job that you even here now have these pundits, journalists, including journalist Brian Lilly, repeating it, talking about it in the terms of the U.S. ambassador, Pete Hoekstra. You see, simply by getting people to talk about it and to some degree even to buy into the idea that maybe there's some validity to what he's saying, he's just won the battle for your mind, or at least for the minds of many. Let's pick it up here and watch what happens as they respond to what Hoekstra said on this other live stream.
Will be a use tax that will pay for the bridge.
So that clip created a lot of controversy, as we mentioned off the top, picked up by news outlets around the world. Do you buy his argument that we didn't really pay for the bridge, and therefore they need a cut?
It's an absurd statement, frankly, and just the fact that people are entertaining it, and then he's asking the question: do you buy it? Do you accept what he's saying as something that may be true? And we get this.
I asked someone who was on the committee that got that bridge moving, and he said, "Well, it's better. It's a nicer answer than just saying we want to shake you down for money."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say it's an interesting spin. It's an interesting argument. And one can say perhaps Americans will be eventually paying for the bridge, which factually is correct.
No, it's not.
But I look at it from a...
That's not true. You see, this is... Hoekstra just won the fight, won the battle, the InfoWar battle. It's an absurd statement. That's like saying that I pay for McDonald's if I go to McDonald's and buy a Happy Meal. That's like saying that if you buy a Chevy Cruise, that you're paying for the company. No, you're paying for the product. You're paying for the service. You're effectively paying a toll to cross the bridge, but the Canadian government paid for it up front. And then Hoekstra goes further than that and has made the statement that because it's basically funding, or it's a financed purchase over time, that's not really paying for it. And that ultimately it's the people using the bridge that are paying for the bridge. No, that's because there's such a thing as property rights. And because the Canadian government had to pay for this whole thing up front because the US government or the Michigan government either couldn't afford to or just wasn't willing to pay for any of it, the Canadian government stepped up and financed the whole thing. But there has been recognized mutual benefit and value on the U.S. side, as acknowledged by the government of Michigan, which is being given 50% ownership in the bridge. The Canadian government, over time, will recoup its investment over many decades by charging a toll on the Canadian side for people, including trucks, that transit the bridge, both going to the United States and coming back. Entirely, all of the staffing, all of the administrative work in collecting the tolls on the Canadian side. Now, the deal is that once the investment has been recouped from the tolls over time, decades, because it's such a massive investment, that then the revenue between Canada and the state of Michigan would then be split. After that, revenue split 50% each between Michigan and the Canadian government, which paid for the bridge up front. All the risk being assumed on the Canadian side by the Canadian government. It's no different than having a mortgage on a home. Just because you finance the purchase of a home doesn't mean you don't own it while you're paying off the mortgage. The property belongs to you, but you're on the hook for the debt. And once it's paid off, you continue to own the property. Just because someone crosses the bridge and pays a toll of $5.75 does not mean that the person crossing the bridge owns the bridge. You're a customer. And it's the service that you're paying for. It's not for part ownership of the bridge. It doesn't give you a stake or ownership in it in any respect other than a consumer. That's the truth. That's the reality of it, but not so framed by Pete Hoekstra, U.S. Ambassador to Canada. But here you are with a couple of pretty smart guys who fall into the trap and buy into Hoekstra's reality, which isn't realistic at all.
Risk-taking perspective. Who took on the risk to build a bridge? Canada. Mm-hmm. Canada built the bridge. Canada financed the bridge. And so Canada took on that risk.
Right. So he's acknowledging that and saying, he's saying exactly what I'm saying, but they're still entertaining the idea that what Hoekstra has said is in some way valid. This now gives the Trump administration, which is really backing up the Maroon family, which owns the Ambassador Bridge, some leverage against the Canadian government, because the first thing he has to do is get people to buy into the idea that somehow Canada paying for the bridge. That's a myth. Canada isn't paying for anything. Canada doesn't have a stake in this. This is how crazy it is. So suddenly Canada paying for the bridge is a myth. When the money was put up, the bridge wouldn't exist if Canada hadn't paid for it. With financed money, yes, but still paid for it and needs to recoup the investment. It's an investment to be recouped over time, just as the majority of businesses and and homes and large purchases like everything from automobiles to your washer and dryer and appliances are often sometimes financed. That's the case with this bridge, which is, reasonable considering the huge expenditure, the huge outlay of cash up front. So it's been capitalized. That's what capital is for. Capital in terms of money. That's how you put money to work, to leverage it. But the Maroon family not happy about it because it's going to it will be direct heavy-duty competition against the privately owned Ambassador Bridge built back in the 1920s. If Hoekster's argument or suggestion or mind screw here, his congratulation, if any of that were to actually be true or hold up, then what you would say, if that were true at all, is that the Maroon family, which owns the long-standing Ambassador Bridge and has recouped billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in profits over the years, then you and I own that damn bridge right now because I've crossed that bridge, and the Maroon family wouldn't have any stake in it at all. They wouldn't have any right to anything. And the Canadian government does not collect tolls on the Ambassador Bridge. And the tolls on that bridge are considerably higher. I think they're for cars, I think they're about double what they're going to be charging at the Gordie Howe Bridge. That's why they're upset. And trucking companies also will reap, huge savings, both US and Canadian trucking firms and shippers. It will be much more efficient, cost effective to cross on the Gordie Howe Bridge. As a result, the Ambassador Bridge has already started to reduce prices because now you have actual competition. Trucks can't go through the Windsor-Detroit tunnel, and there is risk with regard to this huge international project because the city of Windsor and the municipality of Detroit, they jointly own, I believe, the Windsor-Detroit tunnel, but that tunnel has not always been profitable. There have been some years where the tunnel has actually lost money. And that has happened because of things like the pandemic, dips in the economy, and trucks can't transit the tunnel. So the bridge company, the Ambassador Bridge Company, owned by the Maroon family, has pretty much had a captive market, something of almost a monopoly on cross-border traffic at the Windsor-Detroit border. It's one of the busiest cross-border locations in North America, and billions of dollars at stake. That's what's really playing out here. Let's finish this clip.
And so, to me, really, the real question is which nation has actually accepted all the risks to build that bridge, and that would be Canada. And that's why that needs to be recognized. And I don't think that the ambassador recognizes that at all.
No, he doesn't. Unfortunately, just by talking about it, we're all kind of legitimizing his arguments to the point where it's like, well, maybe he has a point. No, he doesn't have a point. Not at all. It's absolutely complete congratulation. And I mean, it's almost appropriate that we're getting this snorthing, which is to say you can't tell what direction you're going in. You don't know whether you're going south, northeast, or west. And that's what he's doing. This is a master congratulator snorthing us, confusing the heck out of everybody. And, it's only appropriate because if you look at the Ambassador Bridge, the Gordie Howe Bridge, the Windsor-Detroit Tunnel, the geography in this whole thing, a lot of it doesn't make sense when you're thinking about it in terms of like, what direction am I going in? Because if I leave from Toronto and I'm heading for Windsor, Detroit, what direction am I going in? Well, the United States is supposed to be south of Canada, right? So we'll head west. That's the direction you go in on the 401, which makes no sense, but it's true. All the signs on Highway 401 that take you from Toronto all the way through London, Chatham, and then all the way down to Windsor, Detroit, and to the border to cross into Detroit, that's heading west until you actually get to the border. And then what direction are you going in to go from Canada to the United States? Well, actually, you're heading north because Detroit is north of Windsor, which is located in the United States, which is generally accepted to be south of Canada. And everything I told you is absolutely true, but I'm not trying to combustulate here. This is not an exercise in combustulation. It's actually factual. And if you look at a map and you look very closely, you'll find that everything I just told you is true, but that's not the case with Pete Hoekstra. What he's doing is he's confusing people with very confusing language. It's a myth. It's a myth that Canada paid for the bridge, just like these guys, the 51st staters and the people on the MAGA side who are trying to disrupt our politics, disrupt our country, and even facilitate, I believe, the takeover of our country, the annexation of it. They're doing this intentionally. That's why also you saw certain key political players on the Canadian side at the U.S. ambassador's big party for the 250th anniversary on the 4th of July, the big party, the birthday party for America at the ambassador's residence here in Canada. Oh, yeah, separatists at work, and I would say being rewarded, wined and dined at the ambassador's residence. Who knows what the actual motivation might be, but yeah, these are people who are certainly in that vein, supporting Alberta separation. And I would say even Quebec separation beyond that, whatever can be done to disrupt things. Some pretty big names in the separatist movement in Canada. And Hoekstra going beyond that to support, I would say, to elevate and promote the independent voices out there in the media circle that are on his side of the political spectrum and maybe even sympathetic to separation and the American cause up here in Canada. Now, I have nothing against Harrison Faulkner, but I think he's kind of over on that side in that camp. Yeah, he's definitely over there with those guys. And that's why Hoekstra giving interviews to people like Harrison Faulkner, smaller names in the media ecosystem up here in Canada, because they are independent, which is fine, but you can see the politics at play here. Why does Hoekstra talk to this person and that person, but not that person? Why is he talking to Harrison Faulkner? Because he's conservative. But even the conservatives in this particular case, and here's Harrison Faulkner trying to hold Hoekstra's feet to the fire, a guy who's supposed to be giving him softball questions. He doesn't do it. So kudos to Harrison Faulkner for actually asking, or at least trying to ask, like serious questions of a man who is being very unserious. Questions of the master combustulator.
The U.S. National Security Strategy, which was released late last year, talks about the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. In particular, it states that in the Western Hemisphere, the United States will establish and expand access in strategically important locations. One such location would be potentially the Northwest Passage. The Canadian government views that as internal sovereign water.
I think
and
I have
the
the
United
wrong
States
clip,
administration
actually.
views that as an international strait. I'm wondering if you can explain the strategic and legal reasonings as to why the U.S. maintains this position when Canada disagrees with it.
It's an international dispute. I think this dispute has been around for quite a while. It's not brand new. I don't know the legalities and the technicalities of this, but the bottom line for us is our vision is working with Canada. I was just at NORAD, Winnipeg, and I asked for, hey, how far does NORAD go? Okay, is it really just protecting along the western border of Canada and the United States? And it's kind of like, no, Pete, it goes, goes along the west coast, and then it goes across the north. All right, we've got stations in various locations that are NORAD stations and facilities, and we think that attacks coming in over the Arctic threaten the United States, obviously then also threaten Canada. We think that a strategy working together and not expanding NORAD in terms of saying, hey, you're going to cover areas that you haven't covered before, but saying, we've got the strategy up there, but it's pretty thin. And we got to deepen that strategy. We need more capabilities up there. And we'd rather do that with Canada than to do it separately. Our position is we think NORAD works and it can be expanded and deepened against the new threats that are out there. That invitation has been put out there to Canada. We're waiting for Canada to respond.
Very quickly, are there concessions on claims to the Northwest Passage being discussed in any negotiations between Canada and the United States?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about in terms of concessions, in terms of saying it's sovereign Canadian territory and those types of things.
Yes.
I don't know.
Also,
I know that we would like to have the discussion about
as these discussions, these media appearances that Hoekstra has been doing over the past, I'd say probably a week. He was asked on legacy or mainstream media outlet what his view was on all of these issues, including the Ambassador Bridge, and also on Alberta separatists going down to meet with the State Department and the U.S. Treasury Department, where the separatists, including Jeffrey Rath, is saying that they've been offered $500 million as a line of credit in order to fund their separatist movement. And then Hoekstra, being reported that he's saying that didn't happen, but he said he doesn't know if that happened. I think he probably does know one way or the other, but said he didn't know. He didn't say, in the ones that I saw, he didn't deny it. And then he came out and he said, well, we meet with a lot of people. So kind of a deflection. But then here, back to the Ambassador Bridge issue with this Harrison Faulkner interview, these are now talking points that have been repeated in multiple interviews and being repeated by commentators and pundits and analysts, which is giving more traction to his statements, giving traction to the snorting.
I have to ask you about your recent comments regarding the Gordie Howe Bridge, which have received national attention in Canada. You said that it was, if I can quote you correctly, that it was one of the big myths about the project, that Canada was funding the bridge. And
I said that Canada was paying
for the bridge,
right? For the bridge. And they are funding the bridge.
Okay. And that due to cost overruns and delays, the business model had changed.
Yes.
I think most Canadians, myself among them, would look at this and say those cost overruns and delays have been absorbed by the Canadian taxpayer. So perhaps you could explain a little bit more about what you meant by those comments and where the misconception is that we have about this project.
Where have those been absorbed by the Canadian taxpayer?
Well, the project itself, the cost of the project was delivered by the Canadian taxpayer. Canada gave the money for it. Yes.
What's the deal? Explain this to me. How do you understand it?
Well, perhaps you can fill me in where we're getting this wrong, because most Canadians seem to believe, based off the reaction to your comments, that Canada has funded the project for this. You even said that at the beginning of the question.
You financed the initial construction of the project.
Right.
Okay, so it's like you said, the numbers are, depending on exactly where you start, but the estimated cost of the bridge was going to be $1.2, $1.5 billion. Okay, financed by the Canadian government with a regime in place that would be paid back, meaning that at the end of the day, when the funds came in from the revenue from the bridge, the Canadian taxpayer would be off the hook. So it's financed by the taxpayer. The Canadian government made a judgment that said, we're going to invest in this project. There's going to be revenues coming back, and we're going to, as those revenues come in, we're going to pay off the bonds or whatever financing the government is using in Canada. So it will be paid back. The taxpayer's off the hook. And what we've been dealing with, and a lot of the discussions have been, is, well, America, you have absolutely no say in the bridge because we paid for it.
It's not true.
It's kind of like, Well, that doesn't seem fair. You know, it's revenues that are coming out of.
It's not true. Canada has been in constant consultation, negotiation with the state of Michigan, the federal government on the U.S. side also involved in discussions. Trump, in his first incarnation as president, Trump 1.0, said that it was a great project, endorsed it, said it was going to be a positive thing. Had nothing negative to say about it at the time. It's only now, as the bridge has been completed, where the deal is in place, that the Trump administration steps up and says, "Wait a minute, no, this deal isn't any good. You paying for it is now what, a myth?" That's BS. And saying that the U.S. side has had nothing to say, it doesn't have a say or a stake in this, that's not true either. If that were the case, then this whole agreement, this contract that is in place would not exist. Of course, the U.S. side has been involved in these negotiations. And they are a stakeholder, especially this, in particular, the state of Michigan. I'm sorry to use the word, but he's lying. It's a big, fat lie, a gigantic, big combustulation. He's snorting us.
The Cross River border area, there's so much revenue that comes out of there. It's either off of the tunnel or off of the bridge, right? Some of that revenue is now going to go to the Gordie Howe Bridge to pay off the Canadian debt. And so we view it as it's a joint project. We identified a lender up front, which was the Canadian government. We identified a way to pay back the lender. And at that point in time, it would be a freestanding bridge governed by.
It's called a return on investment over time, like any business. That's not paying back, as he's putting it, some sort of a financing thing. It's an investment in a business model because of the way that the project had to move forward. Sometimes it's done by a private company, which was the case in the 1920s with the construction of the Ambassador Bridge. That was entirely privately, that was all done really from the U.S. side, with the Canadian government giving just regulatory approvals on the Canadian side in order to get that bridge built way back, in the 1920s. And the Canadian government does not collect tolls on the Ambassador Bridge at all. That's all private money. That's what this is about. This is about the United States, the Trump administration backing up the owners of the Ambassador Bridge. And it's some people with their nose out of joint over a project that is government initiated and not just funded, but owned. There is a bridge company, I believe, that is involved in this that has been set up, but it's the Canadian government that put up all the money, is taking all the risk. Yes, we Canadian taxpayers have paid for this thing, and we have a stake in it. And as a result, as stakeholders, the lower charges for the tolls across that bridge, I in my view, entirely justified and warranted. And they're lower, not just because of competition, but also because as taxpayers, we have a stake in it. And therefore, we should be entitled to get a lower rate. The real question here, I think, is there's a larger question of, are toll roads even appropriate? We see an increasing number of them here on the Canadian side. They're up in the Toronto area. You've got a toll highway that has been constructed in order to relieve some of the pressure off Highway 401 up there, and the gridlock in one of the worst places in the world to drive, the Greater Toronto area. But these things are all controversial. This is public infrastructure, but it's not public if they make it private. If a private company owns a road and you have to pay a toll, it doesn't mean you own it. It means that the private company collects the fee. It's It's a service fee. It's a product fee. It's a consumer fee. You're a consumer. What you've consumed is access to the toll road in order to drive, but they have special permission in order to build these things. Well, that's the case with the Gordie Howe Bridge too, right? And that's the case with the Ambassador Bridge, which has always had special permission and exclusive rights up until now to provide truck traffic across the Detroit River. I think the only other option, which is not really much of an option, is there is a barge that will take trucks carrying hazardous goods across the Detroit River from or to Windsor, Detroit. This argument that he's making is just designed to confuse in order to get as Brian Lilly said, just shake down us Canadians for more money.
An authority. And some of those basic principles are called into question because of what's happened over the last 10 to 15 years as that bridge has been built. And so where do we move forward? Both the Canadian government and the American government a few weeks ago said the bridge isn't ready to open. There's some things that we need to negotiate and that we need to work out. And when those things are worked out, we will open the bridge.
That's because the Canadian government, Mark Carney, has been diplomatic about this. There was an opening date that was established. They were all set for a ribbon cutting, agreed upon by the government of Michigan and the Canadian government. They were ready to go. But then the Trump administration intervened and something happened behind the scenes in order to create another delay. And then when asked about it, as usual, Carney, because we're in a very delicate position with the United States, used some very diplomatic language in order to kind of just kick the can down the road and facilitate further negotiation after the deal had already been made. But I'll tell you this kind of behavior just continues to undermine trust in the United States of America. Fewer and fewer countries trusting the United States, and it's costing the United States more than they know, more than the public over there certainly knows. And that's because now many countries, not only are they not dealing with the United States as much as they were, they are not buying U.S. weapons the way that they were either. This is going to put a huge dent in the United States economy. Make no mistake.
What would be your response to some Canadians who feel like there might be politics involved here?
Because there
might be
Good
something
question.
to do with the Ambassador Bridge owner donating money to the president's super PAC, and then just a month and a half later or so, the bridge announcement gets delayed. To those that might think that, what would be your response? That those two events might not just be a coincidence?
I can't change their perception. You know, the family that owns the Ambassador Bridge, they donated to my campaign. Now, that might have been 16 years ago, that might have been 20 years ago, and people are saying, look, the ambassador was bought off by the family. No, I mean, the bridge came in significantly over budget. Depending on where you start, it's 2 to 3 times more expensive than what it was originally anticipated.
And Canada still paid for the whole shot.
To cost. It took an extra number of years to build the bridge to get to a point where it's almost ready to open. Those are fundamental changes to the original agreement, where the original agreement has not been met. If a project comes in 2 to 3 times more expensive, do you expect the terms of the contract to potentially be reevaluated? And the answer is, in America, yes. Maybe in Canada, not, but in America, when a contractor doesn't deliver to contract within budget, there's sometimes a reevaluation and saying, okay, are the terms still the same or should they be modified? We are where they should be modified.
Because he's a master comblastulator. It's not a myth that Canada paid for it. Canada did pay for it. It's also not a myth that Canada is a country. And that's another big comblastulation, Another attempt to snorth us. We are a sovereign nation. We're just under attack. And the nation attacking us is our best friend. And it's freaking weird. And as I say, that kind of attitude, that approach is damaging the United States more than anybody, I think, realizes. Some people getting it, but I mean, on the U.S. side, largely blinded. And these tariffs, not doing what Donald Trump is telling the people that they're going to do. He's lying. He's combustulating. He's snorting. Look at this. This today. The tariffs are designed to, as you know, Donald Trump has said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you know, he's trying to damage the Canadian economy, to put pressure on us to capitulate to whatever demands he has, maybe up to and including annexation, becoming the 51st state. And Canada's merchandise trade surplus widens to $4.2 billion in May, marking 4-year high. Stats Canada reported a merchandise trade surplus of $4.2 billion in May, the largest since May of 2022. The surplus was driven by increased exports to the United States and higher commodity prices amid the Mideast war. Canada posts third straight trade surplus. So what we're shipping to the United States, we're sending more to the U.S. than we did before, even though the tariffs are supposed to be designed to shut down Canadian factories and move all the manufacturing jobs and productive capacity to the U.S. side. And there's I think a KPMG poll that is out today that is being distributed by some media outlets that I think maybe are using it for clickbait and others for political purposes. And it is saying that, what was it, 60% or 40% of all Canadian businesses have considered moving to the United States. Manufacturers, that is, not all businesses, but manufacturers considered moving to the United States because of the tariffs. Well, duh. Yeah, but it doesn't mean they were planning on it. They were considering it. And if you're running a business, a manufacturing outfit of any kind of a factory where you're exporting any of your product to the United States, of course you're going to think about it and consider it. So if you're polled on that question, the answer would be yes. But it doesn't mean that they're going. It means that they've thought about it. Words are important. And when you play word games, you become a master combustulator, like Pete Hoekstra and Donald Trump, who also tonight posting this, which may not actually be entirely true either. Here he is over on Truth Social saying that Toyota is moving from Mexico to the United States to Texas. A really big deal. Tariffs at work. President Donald J. Trump. I'm seeing conflicting reports on this tonight. Some suggestions that this is actually not true. It looks like the production moving to Texas may actually be coming from a Toyota plant in California, much of it from a plant in Baja, California. And it's apparently a move that is temporary. So I'll be looking more closely at that, but a lot of what comes out of the president's mouth is nothing but combustulation and snorting. It's a mind game. And it's getting nasty, the politics thick, but you can also see if you, especially now, the masks are coming off, it's becoming more and more and more obvious what is going on. And, you know, this is not, at least from my perspective here in Canada, it isn't a liberal, conservative, or political stripe issue of any kind. It's about our national sovereignty, our right to self-determination. It's about standing up for the country in the face of this pressure to force capitulation. And of course, at the tip of the spear, fighting that fight is somebody that some of you may like and some of you may not, but politician turned activist, Charlie Angus.
But I feel now I really need to deal with the ongoing disinformation that you are using.
This is a direct message that he just put out, I believe it was yesterday, directed at Pete Hoekstra himself.
What it means right now for American-Canadian relations and the role that you are playing in undermining our nation at this time. So let's just go through a few of the latest things you said. Like your huge whopper that it's a myth that Canada paid for the Gordie Howe Bridge. Well, that's bullshit. And you know that, and we know that, and we know that you know that. And I think that that's a real big part of the issue here, because what predators do in gaslighting people is they feel they have some kind of power in being able to lie to their face and have the person that is being lied to know that it's a lie. It just shows their contempt for us. Certainly what your boss, the convicted sex predator, does all the time. And it's what you've been doing with us. But I'm going to just bring in here some voices who are not from my political realm at all, who can call you out. Dimitri Sudas, who is a former conservative supporter to Prime Minister Stephen Harper, he was polite. He said, history doesn't become fiction because you say it on television. That's his way of saying you're a liar. I prefer Andrew McDougall, who was the chief of communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who said that your statement was a punch in the face. He said that the United States with Donald Trump and MAGA has shown time and time again that it will punch its friends in the face. Wow. And I think the fact is that Canadians are getting a sense that we aren't friends with the United States anymore. We're adversaries, and we are considered even possible enemies.
Yeah. And isn't that sad? It just seems to me that today there are two Americas. There's the Trump MAGA America that has been nothing but a fallacy, a lie, a deception from the very beginning. I said last night that Trump is laughing at us. He has nothing but contempt for ordinary people. He's engaging in all kinds of corrupt activity where he is enriching himself in ways that I, too, always believed were just exaggerations and manufactured witch hunts even against him. But no, that's the deception. The portrayal of oneself as a victim in order to use sympathy of some kind as a shield. Flipping reality upside down to make your followers think that they have somehow been oppressed, and then pointing the finger at your political enemy and saying it's them, or it's those people over there to blame. It's their fault. They're corrupt. They're stealing from you. Well, Trump goes off to the White House, sits in the Oval Office, makes phone calls, pulls levers through social media and statements in order to effectively create an info war environment where stock prices and oil prices go up and down like a yo-yo so that friends can benefit from it. And then he gets involved in cryptocurrency scams. And it's pretty clear that he's selling access to him through these cryptocurrencies and by the gifting of gaudy, grotesque things that don't even have any practical use, like this gigantic ring that he was just given by the Antwerp Diamond Company in order to It appears to get special treatment and exemptions from the tariffs that he has used as a weapon to go to war with really the entire world. Unprecedented what he's doing. Reckless he is, and I would say also vengeful. Determined to do something or achieve something that is so far undefined in Iran, and not getting the response at all that he was promising people. A war that he said wasn't really going to be a war. It was just a little excursion that would be over in just 3 to 4 weeks. Now, almost half a year in, he has some very upset Iranians mourning the death of their supreme leader tonight. We're all going to pay for this at the pump. We're all paying for this. With higher prices for everything. We're all paying for this. In loss of reputation, loss of trust. We're all going to pay for this with more terrorism, more death. It's coming. It's coming. Somebody said to me today that they think maybe Trump will just wipe out Iran. No, he won't. No, he won't. How are you going to wipe this out? You can't. You can't. Everything he's told us, everything this man has told us, from the pandemic, where the man he blamed, Fauci, was his right hand, during the lockdowns and the mandates, threw him under the bus, to the promises that he wouldn't get us involved in any more wars, and now looking for a scapegoat, saying that NATO countries didn't step up and support him, to support the United States when he went into this ill-conceived, ill-planned war that nobody wanted. That wiser people knew would be a huge mistake because you would get this. This isn't over. This is just beginning again. Because of a petty little man who's lied to us and screwed with our minds with an info war that he wages with congratulation and snorting. Not me. Doesn't make me popular these days because so many people are so emotionally and ideologically invested that they prefer to attack me, because to admit that maybe they were misled and tricked or duped by a master congratulator leaves them feeling embarrassed. So they'd rather live the lie. Very dangerous. See you tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
Welcome to the Matrix. Scrolling all night, chasing the high. Everything's fake, psychedelic sky. They said you're free, that's the game. Different screen, always the same. You are what you believe, that's the key. Lock your mind, lose reality. If you believe it, it comes alive. Truth gets buried, nobody survives. The world is watching, brains are washing. Living the lie, glazed over eyes, hypnotized, zombified. Living the lie, no way to hide, truth denied. Switch it off, take back your mind. Living the lie. Same old story, louder now. Truth gets lost inside the crowd. Think you're awake, it's in your head. Different cage, dream is dead. The world is watching, brains are washing. Living the lie, glazed over eyes, hypnotized, zombified. Living the lie, no way to hide, truth denied. Switch it off, take back your mind. Living the lie. Break it down, shut it out, turn it off right now. Break the screen, cut the feed, take back what you need. Living the lie, glazed over eyes, hypnotized, zombified. Living the lie, too tired to fight. Wake up now, take it back tonight. Living the lie, living the lie. No more. Exit the matrix.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.